Malappuram. 45 descendants of the Arakul family, erstwhile rulers of the Malabar coast, will jointly stake a claim for 5,000 crore rupees due to them as compensation from the Sultanate of Saudi Arabia.
5,000 crore, or 50 billion rupees in our numbering system, is a lot of money. About $1 billion. No wonder the Indian media gave the story a run. It even made it to news.com.au's real estate section.
A prominent Malabar family is at loggerheads with a rival clan.
Is how the story began. Unfortunately, that's as far as the News Limited content producer seems to have read, and then mixed up the Malabar coast, which is here, with the Sydney suburb of Malabar, which is here. And that confusion produced this glorious headline.
Powerful Sydney clans feud over $1 billion payment.
Welcome to Media Watch, I'm Jonathan Holmes. And this headline turned out to be just as wrong.
Asian tourists body on beach.
The Sunshine Coast Daily ran big on a tragedy at Granite Bay 3 weekends ago.
Police are investigating after the body of an Asian tourist was found off a secluded beach near Noosa.
Well, sadly, a woman's body was found the previous afternoon, but she wasn't from Asia and she wasn't a tourist. The Queensland Police tell us that
it was a woman from Mount Warren Park. The woman's appearance was described as Caucasian. There's no information to suggest she was a tourist.
And in fact, almost no other media outlet described the woman as an Asian tourist. So, how did it happen? Well, you might remember this from last week's programme.
Last name, Mulugeta. M-U-L-U-G-E-T-A. M as in Mike, Mulugeta.
That brief sentence, overheard on the Boston Police radio network on Friday, April the 19th, led to false information sweeping across the global web and less than 2 hours later onto Australian TV news and current affairs.
His name is Mike Mulugeta. We don't have much information on him. Now, the other man, Sunil Tripathi, he is the man who is still on the run at the moment.
In fact, Sunil Tripathi was never mentioned on Boston Police radio. Mr. Mulugeta's name isn't Mike, and neither had anything whatever to do with the bombings. And as it happened on that same afternoon, the Sunshine Coast Daily's police reporter had her own police radio experience. According to Editor-in-Chief Darren Burnett,
our police reporter heard on the police radio a report that stated the deceased woman appeared to be an Asian tourist.
To be fair, the reporter did check with police media. And Queensland Police tell Media Watch that there is indeed an entry on their radio log.
Informant received a report from a runner to say an Asian girl with a yellow shirt has drowned.
But the police went on.
We would never have said that the reports from police radio had been confirmed, and that information should never have been reported in the media.
Well, according to Mr. Burnett, the reporter originally wrote
that the drowned woman was believed to be an Asian tourist. During the production process, a sub-editor changed this to an Asian tourist.
Ah, those pesky subs again. Well, mistakes happen, Darren, but if you get it wrong, you should fess up. The Sunshine Coast Daily didn't. Speaking of which, we said on Media Watch last week that these words were posted by the Daily Telegraph's Tim Blair on his blog.
Police scanner identified them as IT students Mike Mulugeta and Sunil Tripathi.
Well, they weren't. Blair did name Sunil Tripathi, spelt correctly, as a possible suspect, though not Mulugeta. But the words we quoted were posted by a commenter on his blog and were soon taken down. There was a mix-up in our office and a call that should have been made to Tim Blair wasn't. Our apologies. It's galling when Media Watch stuffs up. But there are some, like News Limited columnist and blogger Andrew Bolt, for example, who reckon we stuff up every week. Or at least that neither I nor any of my predecessors ever say the things that he would say if only he had the job. Last week, when news resurfaced that I'm leaving this chair shortly, Andrew made a very public pitch for it to Managing Director Mark Scott.
Mark, I want you to know I stand ready to serve when your current host, Jonathan Holmes, stands down. I know how welcome this news will be. You must be mortified that in the 24 years of Media Watch, devoted to detecting such media sins as bias and groupthink, not once has it had a host not of the left.
Andrew's world is a simple one. It has two boxes. There's the one that right-minded people like himself inhabit, and there's the box in which just about everybody else sits, which he calls the left. My successor, who will not be Andrew Bolt, but Paul Barry, had this to say next morning.
I would certainly describe myself as to the left of Andrew Bolt. So on that basis, I am left-wing. But in no other basis do I think I'm left-wing. I believe in the free market. I believe in freedom of speech. I believe actually in privatisation. I believe in an awful lot of things that would make me a free marketeer and, a liberal. So I don't think that's a valid criticism, and I have never decided anything by ideology. I look at the facts, I analyse what I see before me, and I call it as I see before me.
There are those, of course, who decide everything by ideology. In fact, far too many issues seem to be subjected to a left-right division that shouldn't be. For example, in Andrew Bolt's eyes, I'm apparently less left-wing than any of my esteemed predecessors in this chair.
I even shot a promo for him once saying that Jonathan, in my view, was the least biased of the hosts. But he still is of the left. For example, he does get on his global warming hobby horse at times. I think that's fair enough.
Now, Andrew Bolt and I disagree about global warming. But to me, either the vast majority of the scientists who study this stuff are right, or they're not. It's a question of evidence, not politics. Yet whether or not you accept the reality of anthropogenic climate change seems to have become a test of whether you're on the right or the left. Why, I don't know, and I profoundly wish that it weren't so. And here's another issue that seems to divide left and right when it shouldn't: the freedom of the press. It's a topic about which Andrew Bolt feels strongly, and he seems to think that that marks him out from the left.
Free speech is under threat. Never has the Australian media faced a threat as serious as this.
That was back in September 2011, when Senator Stephen Conroy announced the Finkelstein inquiry into print media regulation. Those who had claimed that the Howard government threatened free speech were missing in action, Bolt claimed.
How loud they were back when there was no real threat and only a Liberal Prime Minister to mock. Where are these people now that the threat is real, and the politicians who rule us openly say they want to use state power to persecute journalists who criticise them?
2 weeks later, a federal court judge found that Andrew Bolt had breached the Racial Discrimination Act. Bolt saw it, of course, as a dangerous limitation on his freedom of speech, and he framed it as conservatives versus the multiculturalists.
Writing frankly about multiculturalism yesterday became too dangerous for any conservative. And so the multiculturalists win. They win because no one now dares object for fear of what it will cost them in court.
Well, Andrew, for what it's worth, and much as I disliked your original columns, I called the court's finding a profoundly disturbing judgment. On the ABC's Drum website, I wrote this: "It creates one particular area of public life where speech is regulated by tests that simply don't apply anywhere else, and in which judges, never for all their pontifications friends of free speech, get to do the regulating." Maybe that means I'm not a lefty, or maybe that people don't fit neatly into Andrew's boxes. But 18 months later, when Communications Minister Stephen Conroy dropped his half-baked media regulation proposals on us, Andrew Bolt added his own special angle to the general condemnation.
No, Stephen, we don't need a media supercop. The only real threat to diversity of opinion is one Mr. Conroy won't discuss: the vast expansion of the left-leaning and government-funded ABC.
Andrew, as that great conservative hero Ronald Reagan famously said, "There you go again." But here's an issue that I'd have thought all journalists would unite on, whatever their political hue. Last Friday was World Press Freedom Day, and tomorrow lawyers acting for two of Australia's finest reporters, Adele Ferguson of Fairfax Media's Business Day and Steve Pennells of The West Australian, will be arguing their case in a Western Australian court. Steve Pennells won the Gold Walkley Award last year for a series of stories about
Reinhardt's bombshell to kids over Hancock legacy.
They revealed for the first time the details of Gina Reinhardt's secret legal stoush with her children. Ever since, Pennells and the West Australian have been fighting a subpoena issued by Gina Reinhardt's company, Hancock Prospecting, that requires them to deliver up, in Steve Pennell's words,
every bit of communication to dealing with Gina Rinehart, emails, text messages, phone records, notes of conversations, recordings dating back to September 4, 2011.
That Pennell's or any other reporter at the West may have exchanged with any of her children. That's since been narrowed to communications with Ms. Rinehart's son, John Hancock. Adele Ferguson, whose biography of Gina Rinehart came out last year, is now facing a similar subpoena. Ms. Rinehart is not suing either journalist for defamation. There's no suggestion that their stories were inaccurate. Ms. Rinehart's lawyers say that this trove of information, most of which the reporters have promised their sources not to disclose, is
relevant to the conduct of an arbitration, the details of which are confidential.
That is, a private court battle between herself and two of her children in a different state. The recently passed Western Australian Shield Law, which supposedly offers journalists some protection against having to reveal confidential sources, is so narrow and hedged about conditions that, in the words of media barrister Mark Polden,
in West Australia at least, the laws probably really aren't worth the paper they're written on.
In the eyes of most journalists in Australia, the subpoenas are a serious attack on the freedom of the press. For if reporters cannot keep their dealings with sources confidential, investigative journalism of any kind will become all but impossible. Now, Andrew Bolt, we understand, is one of the few journalists that Ms. Rinehart respects and listens to. He presents a programme on the 10 network, in which she's a major shareholder. But the toughest thing he's written about the issue to date is this.
For a major shareholder of Fairfax and board member at Channel 10 to take action which could ultimately see one of her company's own journalists jailed is indeed a terrible look.
But he goes on to argue this is not an attack on free speech, and he frames the argument as usual in terms of left versus right. That blog and his response to me will be on our website shortly. But politics aren't the issue, or shouldn't be. As Steve Pennell's put it at the Walkley Press Freedom Dinner last Friday night in Sydney,
actions like this have a chilling effect on investigative journalism. I've spoken to reporters who are reluctant to write stories about Gina Rinehart as aggressively as they otherwise would because of what is happening to Adele and I. And I know sources, good sources, who have gone to ground for fear of being exposed.
Come on, Andrew, where's the moral outrage? You're normally so good at that. As for me, I'll be here for a while yet. Until next week, good night.